Ivan Volkov pressed his boot into the back of Commander Harrington's neck and laughed. Not the laugh of a soldier, the laugh of a man who had already won. He looked at the camera his men were recording on and said in clean, unaccented English, "Send this to your base. Tell them their hero is breathing for now. Tell them to send someone worth my time." Then he leaned down and whispered into Harrington's ear, "No one is coming for you." He was wrong about that. Subscribe to this channel right now and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now let's go. The morning that Commander Michael Harrington disappeared, the temperature at Forward Operating Base Sentinel was already climbing past 104 degrees by 7 in the morning. Not the kind of heat that makes you sweat. The kind that makes you feel like the air itself is trying to push you back inside. The kind of heat that the desert uses like a weapon, slow and patient, and absolutely certain of its own power. Harrington stood outside the operations tent with a cup of coffee he hadn't drunk yet, staring out at the horizon. He had been at Sentinel for 11 weeks. 11 weeks of recon missions, intel briefings, and the particular exhaustion that comes not from fighting, but from waiting to fight. He was 43 years old. He had a daughter back in Savannah who had just turned 9. He had a wife who sent him photographs of their backyard garden every Sunday. Not because she thought he needed to see flowers, but because she knew he needed to remember what green looked like. He set the coffee cup down on a flat rock and picked up his radio. Viper 1 to command, confirming departure at 0800, route Alpha as briefed, estimated return 36 hours. The voice that came back was crisp, professional. Copy that, Viper 1, safe passage. He didn't know those would be the last words anyone at Sentinel would hear from him for a very long time. Inside the operations center, Captain Daniel Mercer was already at the main table surrounded by maps and half-eaten energy bars and the particular organized chaos that he believed made him look decisive. Mercer was 38, a Virginia Military Institute graduate, a man who wore his authority the way some men wore expensive watches. Visibly, deliberately, always making sure you noticed it. He was pointing at a topographical map when Rachel Dawson walked in. She was carrying 2 folders and a ceramic mug of tea. She moved quietly the way people move when they've spent years training themselves not to be noticed. She was 35, medium height, with dark eyes that took in a room the way a camera shutter takes in light. Fast, completely, all at once. She set one folder on the edge of the table close to where Mercer was standing. He didn't look up. "Analyst Dawson," he said, still pointing at the map. "I need the supply chain update for the Eastern Corridor. That's the priority right now." "Yes, sir," Rachel said, "but I also flagged some concerns about Route Alpha." "Route Alpha was approved at 0600, Mercer said, cutting her off with the ease of a man who had been cutting people off his entire career. "The mission parameters are set. Harrington's team has their orders." Rachel looked at the map. Her eyes moved across it slowly, methodically, and something behind them shifted. A calculation, a quiet private reckoning. "Sir," she said, "the Eastern Ridge elevation changes create a natural overwatch corridor at grid reference." "Dawson." Mercer finally looked up. He looked at her the way he always looked at her, like she was a piece of furniture that had wandered into the wrong room. "You're a logistics analyst. You coordinate supply lines and equipment requests. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but the tactical assessment has been handled by people who are qualified to handle it." "Understood." The room had gone quiet. 3 other analysts were watching without appearing to watch. A young corporal near the door had stopped typing. Rachel held Mercer's gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then she nodded once. "Understood, sir." She picked up her tea and walked to her station in the corner of the room. She sat down, she opened her laptop, and she began very quietly to do what she always did when she was told to stay in her lane. She watched everything. Harrington's convoy left at precisely 0800. 12 men and 4 vehicles. Delta operators, 2 combat engineers, a medic, and a communications specialist. All of them experienced. All of them steady. All of them moving through terrain that had been assessed as high probability, hostile, and then somehow approved anyway. Rachel watched the convoy's tracker signal on her secondary screen. She had a small notepad beside her laptop. She wrote nothing on it. She just looked at the route displayed on the screen and thought about angles. The problem with Route Alpha wasn't any single thing. It was everything in sequence. The road narrowed to a single-lane passage at kilometer 14, right where the ridgeline on the eastern side would give a shooter a perfect downward angle on any vehicle moving through. The communications relay point was 3 kilometers past that in a valley that naturally degraded radio signal by 30 to 40%. The timing of the mission meant the convoy would be at its most exposed position right at midday, which meant sun directly overhead, which meant maximum visibility for anyone on high ground looking down. Rachel had run these numbers at 2 in the morning, sitting alone at her station while everyone else slept. She had written a report. She had submitted it through proper channels at 0500. It had been reviewed, she was told, and the mission had proceeded as planned. The report was in Mercer's inbox, unopened. She knew because she could see the red receipts. She looked at the tracker signal on her screen. The convoy was at kilometer 7, moving steady, moving exactly on schedule. She picked up her tea. It had gone cold. She drank it anyway. By 1400 hours, the signal from Viper 1 was still steady. Mercer walked through the operations center, twice made 2 phone calls, and told 2 different people that the mission was proceeding exactly as planned. He said it with the confidence of a man who had decided confidence was a form of competence. Rachel had been at her station for 6 hours without a break. She had processed 47 equipment requests, cross-referenced 3 supply manifests, and said almost nothing to anyone. But her secondary screen never went dark. The tracker signal pulsed every 30 seconds like a heartbeat. At 14:22, the signal stopped pulsing. Rachel sat very still. She waited 20 seconds. The signal came back. Then it went out again. Then it came back for 8 seconds. Then nothing. She stood up. "Captain Mercer." Her voice was completely level, the kind of level that takes years of practice to produce. Mercer was across the room talking to his senior sergeant about equipment rotation. He turned with the expression of a man who has been interrupted mid-sentence and is not happy about it. "What is it, Dawson?" "The GPS tracker on Viper 1 is showing signal degradation consistent with either active jamming or device damage, sir. The pattern is irregular, which rules out simple terrain interference." Mercer walked toward her station. He looked at the screen. The signal pulsed once weakly and then flattened into a solid, unbroken line of nothing. Something moved through his face. Not panic, not yet, but the early shadow of it. "It's probably comms interference," he said. "The valley terrain." "Sir, the convoy should be past the valley by this point," Rachel said. "If the timing held, they're in the open corridor near kilometer 18. Signal should be cleaner, they're not weaker." Mercer stared at the screen. He stared at it the way men stare at things they don't want to understand. "Get me a radio contact," he said to the room. Nobody moved fast enough. Now, the first contact attempt failed, then the second, then a third attempt on an alternate frequency produced 2 seconds of static, and then what might have been a voice and might have been wind and was impossible to identify as either. The fourth attempt produced something unmistakable. 3 words fragmented through heavy interference in a voice that sounded like it was coming from the bottom of something dark. "Viper taking fire." And then nothing. Absolute nothing. The operations center went very quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't silence but is something heavier than silence. The kind of quiet that fills a room when everyone in it simultaneously understands that something has gone catastrophically wrong and none of them know how to say it out loud yet. Mercer straightened his back. Rachel could see him doing it. Could see him pulling himself into the posture of command like a man putting on armor he wasn't sure he could carry. "All right," he said. "QRF activation. I want a rescue team staged in 20 minutes. "Sir," said Master Gunnery Sergeant Samuel Briggs from the doorway. He was a large man somewhere in his mid-50s with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same rock the desert was made of. He had been standing in that doorway for the last 4 minutes and nobody had noticed him arrive. "We don't have a confirmed position. Sending a QRF into that corridor without a confirmed position is—" "I'm aware of the risks," Sergeant Major Mercer said. "I don't think you are, sir." The room held its breath. Mercer looked at Briggs for a long moment. Then he looked away. 20 minutes, he said. "Get them staged." Briggs didn't move immediately. His eyes moved across the room, and for just a fraction of a second, they stopped on Rachel. Not a long stop, not a meaningful stop to anyone watching. Just a glance that landed and departed in less than a heartbeat. But Rachel saw it. And she understood something from it that she couldn't have explained to anyone in that room. She looked back at her screen. The tracker signal was dead. Completely, absolutely dead. She opened a new window on her laptop. She began to type. The QRF launched at 14:55. 16 men, 2 vehicles, an MRAP, and a rapid deployment helicopter that was supposed to provide aerial support. Mercer briefed them himself, standing in front of the vehicle bay with a laser pointer and a lot of certainty. Rachel stood at the back of the group. She was not required to be there. She had come anyway. She listened to Mercer describe the extraction route. She listened to him explain the communication protocols. She listened to him lay out the tactical approach with the confidence of a man who had studied warfare extensively and understood it deeply in the way that people who have studied things deeply and rarely done them sometimes do. She counted 7 separate tactical errors in his briefing. She said nothing. When the QRF mounted up and the vehicles began to move toward the gate, she walked back to the operations center. She sat at her station. She looked at her screen. Then she looked at the clock. Then she looked at the door. Briggs was standing in it again. He walked toward her without hurry, without urgency, the way a man walks when he has already decided what he is going to say and knows it cannot be unsaid. He stopped beside her station and crossed his arms. "You submitted a report at 0500, he said. It was not a question. "Yes," she said. "You identified the Overwatch corridor at the Eastern Ridge." "Yes." "And the Comms Valley?" "Yes." "And in the timing exposure at midday?" "Yes, Sergeant Major." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said very quietly so that only she could hear, "How long have you known?" She looked up at him. There was something in his face that wasn't quite a question. It was more like a door being opened, carefully, deliberately. "Known what?" she said. He held her gaze. He was not a man who looked away easily. "About the trap," he said. The word landed in the space between them like a stone dropped into still water. Rachel felt the ripple of it move through her chest. She did not let it reach her face. "I identified tactical vulnerabilities in the mission plan," she said carefully. "I don't have evidence of Rachel." It was the first time he had used her first name. The first time in all the weeks she had been at this base that anyone had used it with that particular weight. Like it was a key fitting into a lock. "I knew your brother." She went very still. The operations center hummed around them. Someone across the room was talking on a phone. A fan oscillated in the corner. The world continued doing everything the world does when the ground is quietly shifting beneath a single person's feet. "He talked about you," Briggs said. "Before Fallujah. He talked about you a lot." Rachel said nothing for a long moment. She looked at her screen. The tracker signal was still dead. The QRF was 17 minutes out from the last known position of Viper 1. "The QRF is going to be ambushed," she said. Not as a theory, not as a possibility, as a fact she had already calculated and accepted and moved past. Briggs looked at her steadily. "I know," he said. "The corridor that Mercer is sending them through." "I know," he said again. "Then why?" "Because I couldn't stop it," he said. "Same reason you couldn't. Because the man with the authority made his decision, and the man with the authority is always right until the body count proves otherwise." He paused, his jaw tightened. "But there are things I can do that Captain Mercer doesn't have authority over." Rachel looked at him. He looked back at her. "What things?" she said. He uncrossed his arms. He straightened slightly. "There's a vehicle in Bay 3 that isn't on the manifest," he said. "There's a weapons cache in Supply Room 7 that isn't logged until tomorrow morning's inventory. And I am a master gunnery sergeant with 31 years of service and enough operational flexibility to take a vehicle out for a maintenance check at any time I decide one is necessary." Rachel stared at him. "You'd be going outside authorization," she said. "Yes," he said. If this goes wrong, he said, "then I am an old man who made a bad decision and there will be consequences." He paused. "But I have known about you for a long time, Specialist, and I don't think this is going to go wrong." The word hit her the way he had intended it to. Not analyst, not Dawson, not the logistics officer, the desk worker, the woman with the folders and the tea in the corner station. Specialist. She looked at her screen one more time. The QRF was 14 minutes out. The tracker signal from Harrington's convoy was dead. And somewhere in the desert in a compound, that nobody at this base had correctly identified as a threat, a man named Ivan Volkov was sitting with his boot on the neck of an American commander and waiting for whoever was brave enough and foolish enough and skilled enough to come find him. Rachel closed her laptop. She stood up. Bay 3, she said. Bay 3, Briggs confirmed. She walked to the door. She was already different from the woman who had walked in that morning with the folders and the cold tea. Not visibly, not in any way that anyone watching could have named, but the way a river looks the same from the bank, right up until the moment you step in and feel the current. She paused at the door. Sergeant Major, she said without turning around. Yeah, my brother? She stopped, started again. He would have hated this mission plan. There was a pause from behind her. He would have hated it, Briggs agreed, and then he would have fixed it. Rachel walked out of the operations center into the brutal afternoon heat of the desert that had swallowed a commander and was now waiting patient and vast and absolutely certain of its own power for whatever came next. She did not look back. In the operations center, Captain Mercer stood at the main table and stared at the dead tracker screen and told himself the QRF would resolve the situation. He had made the right call. He was certain of it. He was always certain. The clock on the wall read 15:14. In 22 minutes, the QRF was going to drive into an ambush that had been waiting for them since before the sun came up. And the only person who had understood that from the beginning was already gone. Mercer looked around the room. Something nagged at the edge of his awareness. Something absent, something he couldn't immediately name. He looked at the corner station. Empty. Cold tea mug, closed laptop, 2 folders stacked neatly at the edge of the desk exactly as they always were. He frowned slightly. Then his radio crackled with a status update from the QRF team leader, and he turned back to the main table, and the nagging thing at the edge of his awareness sank back beneath the surface of all the other things he was certain about. Outside in Bay 3, an engine turned over quietly in the dark. And Rachel Dawson, who was not logistics, who was not a desk officer, who was not the woman with the folders and the cold tea and the corner station, drove out into the desert to bring a man home. The vehicle from Bay 3 moved without headlights for the first 4 kilometers. Briggs drove. Rachel sat in the passenger seat with a tactical bag on her lap that she had not opened yet, her eyes fixed on the terrain ahead, running numbers in her head that she had been running since 5 in the morning. The bag was heavier than it looked. Everything about Rachel Dawson was heavier than it looked. Neither of them spoke for the first several minutes. That was something she had noticed about Briggs from the day she arrived at Sentinel. He understood the value of silence. Most men in his position filled silence with words, with authority, with the sound of their own certainty. Briggs let silence do its work. It was one of the reasons she had decided early on that he was worth watching carefully. He was also, she had calculated, the one person on this base who might actually be dangerous enough to be useful. 18 kilometers to the last confirmed position, he said, finally, his voice low and even, the way a man speaks when he is conserving everything, including sound. At this speed, we're looking at 22 minutes before we reach the outer edge of the corridor. The QRF will be at the corridor in about 9 minutes, Rachel said. Briggs was quiet for a moment. They're moving too fast, he said. Yes, she said. Mercer pushed the timeline. Yes. Another silence. The desert moved past them in the dark, vast, and indifferent. How confident are you, Briggs asked. About the ambush? Rachel looked at him. On a scale of 1 to 10, sure. 11, she said. He nodded once slowly, the way a man nods when he has heard exactly what he expected to hear and finds no comfort in being right. Tell me what you know, he said. All of it, from the beginning. 15 hours earlier, and this is the part that no one at FOB Sentinel knew. The part that Rachel had carried alone since before the mission briefing, before the coffee cups and the maps, and Mercer's laser pointer, Rachel had intercepted something she was not supposed to intercept. It had come in as a fragment of encrypted traffic on a secondary monitoring channel that technically fell outside her operational scope. Logistics analysts did not monitor tactical communications. That was not their lane. Rachel monitored it anyway, the way she monitored everything that moved through the digital nervous system of the base quietly and completely and without asking anyone's permission. The fragment was 47 characters, partial, corrupted at both ends, useless to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. Rachel knew exactly what she was looking at. The character string contained a routing signature she had seen before, twice before to be specific. Once in a pre-mission intelligence summary from an operation in eastern Syria 3 years ago. Once in a threat assessment from a joint JSOC task force operation in Somalia 18 months ago. Both times the signature had preceded an ambush on American forces. Both times the ambush had been executed with a level of precision and patience that pointed to a single operational architect. Someone who planned not just attacks, but sequences. Someone who didn't just set traps, but built entire environments of failure layer by layer so that every response to the trap became part of the trap. She had spent 2 hours confirming the signature match. Then she had written her report and submitted it at 5 in the morning and gone back to watching the tracker signal and waiting for someone with authority to listen. Nobody had listened. And now she was in an unlisted vehicle in the dark with a man who had known her brother, and the QRF was 9 minutes from driving into exactly the environment she had described in the report that was still sitting unread in a captain's inbox. His name is Ivan Volkov, Rachel said. Russian national, former FSB, then private contractor. He's been operating in the southwestern corridor for at least 8 months, which means someone with serious resources has been paying him for at least 8 months, which means this isn't improvised. This has been planned. Briggs kept his eyes on the terrain ahead. Planned for Harrington specifically. Planned for a commander-level target, Rachel said. Harrington was the most predictable choice. His mission schedule, his route preferences, his communication protocols, all of it has been observable to anyone with access to base movement patterns for the last 6 weeks. Someone on the inside, Briggs said. Someone with enough access to know the patterns, Rachel said carefully. I'm not ready to say inside, not yet, but the data points that direction. Briggs was quiet for 4 full seconds. She could see the muscles in his jaw working. Your report, he said, the one from 0500. Yes. Who cleared it for review? Sergeant First Class Donnelly. He routed it to Captain Mercer's inbox at 0540. And Mercer never opened it. No. Could have been negligent, Briggs said. He said it the way a man says something he doesn't entirely believe, but isn't ready to discard. Could have been, Rachel said. Another silence. The vehicle's speed was constant, controlled. Briggs drove the way he did everything with the economy of someone who had long since stopped wasting motion. Then the radio on Rachel's tactical bag crackled. One burst of fragmented audio. Voices she couldn't immediately separate. And then, clear as a gunshot, a single phrase from a voice she recognized as the QRF team leader, a sergeant named Torres who had been at Sentinel for 4 months and had a photograph of his daughter taped to the visor of every vehicle he drove. Contact left. We are taking ambush from the 2 o'clock multiple RPG fire we need. And then the signal collapsed into noise. Briggs pressed the accelerator. The vehicle surged forward. 17 minutes out, he said. They won't last 17 minutes in that corridor, Rachel said. I know. We need a different approach vector. I know. He was already adjusting the steering. I know a route. It adds 4 minutes, but it keeps us off the primary corridor. We come in from the western ridgeline. That puts us above the ambush position. That's the idea, Briggs said. Rachel opened the tactical bag. What was inside the bag was not the equipment of a logistics analyst. It was not supply manifests or equipment requests or the administrative tools of someone whose job was to count things and move them from one place to another. What was inside the bag was a disassembled precision rifle system that Rachel began assembling in the dark with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this so many times that her hands no longer needed her eyes to do it. She assembled it by feel, by sequence, by the specific mechanical memory that lives in the muscles, in the fingertips, rather than in the thinking part of the brain. Briggs glanced over once. He looked back at the terrain. He said nothing. The rifle came together in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. She ran a chamber check, a scope check, adjusted the bipod, verified the magazine, and set it across her knees with the same matter-of-fact calm with which a carpenter might pick up a hammer. Then she picked up her own radio and keyed a frequency that was not listed in the base's operational directory. Bravo 7 actual, this is Ghost. Authenticate November Sierra Echo 7. Static, 3 seconds of static that felt much longer. Then a voice controlled and careful, Ghost Bravo 7 reads you, authentication confirmed, sitrep. QRF is in the corridor taking fire. Ambush confirmed at grid reference. She read off coordinates from the screen on her secondary device numbers she had already calculated, already verified, already trusted. I need eyes on the eastern ridge. Tell me what you have. A pause, keys clicking somewhere distant. Ghost, we have two thermal signatures on the eastern ridge elevation. One on the north ridge line, one rooftop position approximately 300 meters south. Both stationary, both with optics. Overwatch snipers. Rachel said not to the voice on the radio and not to Briggs, but to the space in front of her where the problem was taking shape. Two confirmed Overwatch positions. That means the main ambush force in the corridor below is operating under cover from above. The QRF can't push through without clearing the high ground first. Confirm, the voice said. You want me to maintain this channel? Yes, stay live. She set down the radio, picked up her rifle, checked the scope again. Briggs said, how far to the eastern ridgeline from our approach vector? 840 meters from the western edge, she said. 920 to the north position. He said nothing for a moment. Then, that's a long shot. Yes, she said. He said nothing else. The radio crackled again. Torres's voice broken and desperate and trying very hard not to be either of those things, which made it worse somehow. We have 2 men down. Medic is hit. We're pinned behind the MRAP. Left flank is completely open. If they push that flank, a burst of static, the sound of something large and metal being struck by something moving very fast. Then Torres again, and his voice had changed, had dropped into the register that men's voices reach when they have moved past fear into something simpler and colder. If someone doesn't clear that ridge, we are going to lose people. We are going to lose a lot of people. Rachel checked her watch. They were 11 minutes out from the western ridgeline approach. She keyed her radio again. Torres, this is Ghost. Hold your position. Do not push the left flank. Repeat, do not push the left flank. You have overwatch on both ridges. Any movement in the open will be observed and engaged. Stay behind the MRAP. A pause, then Torres' voice confused and sharp at the same time. Oh, who is this? What channel? Who is this? A friend, Rachel said. Stay behind the MRAP. I need 8 minutes. Lady, I don't know who you are, but I have 2 wounded and 8 minutes, she said again. And then she took her finger off the transmit key and looked out at the darkness ahead and told herself 8 minutes like it was the only fact in the world. Briggs drove. At FOB Sentinel, Captain Mercer was standing at the communication station with both hands flat on the table and his face doing something complicated. He had been listening to the fragmented transmissions from the corridor for the last 6 minutes. He had been listening to Torres's voice break apart and reform and break apart again, and something in his chest had been doing the same thing, though he would not have named it that. Get me a status update, he said, for the 4th time in 6 minutes. Sir, we're getting fragmented transmissions only. The corridor terrain is degrading the signal. We can't get a clear picture of. What about the second QRF can we launch? Sir, if we send another unit into that corridor before we know what we're dealing with. Then what do you suggest? Mercer's voice came out louder than he intended. The room went quiet again. He pulled the volume back. What do you suggest we do? Nobody answered. Because the answer that existed in that room, the real answer, the one that lived in the silence between his question and the absence of any response, was that the man who should have answered this question had already driven out of Bay 3 and was not coming back. Mercer straightened. He looked around the room. His eyes moved to the corner station. Empty, cold mug, closed laptop, 2 folders. He frowned. This time the nagging thing didn't sink back down. Where is Analyst Dawson? He said. The room produced a silence of a different quality. The kind of silence that means several people know something and are calculating whether this is the moment to say it. A young specialist near the door, Alvarez, 22 years old, 3 months at Sentinel, cleared his throat. Sir, Alvarez said, I saw Sergeant Major Briggs leave through the vehicle bay about 40 minutes ago. I thought it was a maintenance run, but... He stopped. Mercer looked at him. But what specialist? Alvarez swallowed. Analyst Dawson left about 3 minutes after him, sir. Through the same bay. The room held its breath. Mercer stood very still. He looked at the corner station. He looked at the 2 neatly stacked folders at the edge of the desk. He thought about Dawson this morning, standing at his table with her tea and her report saying the words Eastern Ridge and Overwatch Corridor. and watching him dismiss her with the ease of a man who had spent a career being certain. He thought about those words. He thought about Torres's voice in the radio. He reached over and picked up the tablet that logged the base's operational inbox. He found his own name. He found a message from 0540. He opened it. He began to read Rachel Dawson's report. He got 3 paragraphs in before he had to stop and put the tablet down and take 2 slow breaths. The 3rd paragraph described the Overwatch corridor on the eastern ridge. It described the timing exposure. It described the communications dead zone. It described with a precision that felt less like analysis and more like prophecy exactly what was happening to his QRF at this exact moment. He picked up the tablet again and kept reading. By the end of the report, his face had gone a color that had nothing to do with the heat. "Get me Briggs on the radio," he said very quietly. "Sir, if he's in the corridor." "Get me Briggs on the radio," he said again. 11 minutes and 40 seconds after Rachel had told Torres to stay behind the MRAP, the vehicle from Bay 3 reached the western ridgeline approach. Briggs cut the engine 200 meters from the crest. They got out quietly. Briggs carried his own weapon and a spotting scope. Rachel carried the rifle. They moved to the crest on their stomachs. Rachel settled into position, the rifle extended before her. The bipod planted her eye at the scope. Below and to the east, she could see the corridor. She could see the QRF vehicles, 2 of them. One tilted at an angle that meant a blown tire or a damaged axle. She could see men behind the MRAP, small from this distance, moving in the tight, controlled way of people who are trying to stay alive behind cover. She could see muzzle flash from the eastern ridge. Organized, patient, controlled. Professional, she thought. Volkov trains his people well. She shifted the scope to the north ridgeline position. The thermal imaging showed a shape. Human, prone, rifle extended, working methodically, patiently targeting the men pinned below. "North ridgeline," she said. "Confirm." "Confirmed," Briggs said through the spotting scope. 916 meters. Wind from the southwest 8 to 12 knots. Target is stationary. Rachel adjusted. She made calculations that she had made so many times they had become physical, rather than mental adjustments in the body, rather than in the mind. She controlled her breathing. She let it slow. She found the space between heartbeats. She did not think about what she was doing. She thought about Torres's voice on the radio. She thought about the 2 men already down in that corridor. She thought about Michael Harrington somewhere in the dark with a man's boot on the back of his neck. She pulled the trigger. The north ridge position went still. She was already moving the scope to the eastern elevation position before the echo had finished. "Eastern elevation," Briggs said. 851 meters. Wind is shifting, target moving slightly. Moving how? Slow, maybe repositioning. He heard something. He heard the shot. Yes. How slow is he moving? Slow enough. She found the target in the scope. She made the adjustment for the wind shift. She made the adjustment for the movement. She found the space between heartbeats again. Second shot. The eastern elevation went still. Briggs lowered his spotting scope for exactly 1 second. It was the closest thing to emotion she had seen from him since they left the base. Then he raised it again. 2 down, he said. Corridor below is already responding. Torres is pushing out from the MRAP. Rachel's radio crackled. Torres's voice different now, charged with something electric. Overwatch is down. Somebody cleared the ridge. I don't know who, but move your men to the left flank now, Rachel said into the radio. Push through. There's a secondary position at the south end of the corridor, but it's not elevated. You can suppress it. A half-second pause. Then Torres, without asking a single question about who she was, or where she was, or how she knew, copy, moving. The sound of the firefight below shifted immediately. Rachel could hear it even from the ridgeline, the change in the rhythm of it, the QRF now moving, instead of pin, the tactical balance tilting in the span of 30 seconds. Briggs lowered the spotting scope again. Good shooting, he said, just that. There's a third position, Rachel said. Western outpost approximately 400 meters from the south end of the corridor. Volkov put it there as a cutoff position in case anyone broke out. You sure? Yes. How about them? Because it's where I would have put it, she said. He looked at her, nodded once, raised the scope again. Find it, he said. Oh. She found it in 40 seconds. The western outpost was less elevated than the ridge positions, closer and more hastily set up, which meant it was either a secondary addition or a contingency, something Volkov had added to account for the possibility that his primary overwatch might be compromised, which meant Volkov had planned for the possibility that someone might come at him from the high ground, which meant Volkov was expecting company. That thought moved through Rachel's mind and landed with a weight she did not allow herself to feel yet. 430 meters, Briggs said. 2 targets, one in a fixed position, one moving to cover. She took the fixed position first, then adjusted, breath held, and took the second as he was still in motion. Below in the corridor, the firefight was deteriorating rapidly for the ambush force. Without overwatch cover, the QRF had mobility. With mobility, Torres's training reasserted itself. She could hear it in the radio traffic, his voice steady and command certain, now directing his men through the corridor with the kind of controlled aggression that comes from relief pouring directly into action. QRF is through, Briggs said. Corridor is clear. They're taking casualties back to the MRAP. Rachel lowered the rifle. She looked at the corridor below. She looked at the men moving the vehicles, repositioning the tactical chaos, reorganizing itself into controlled extraction. 4 enemy overwatch positions cleared. QRF through. 2 men wounded, she estimated from Torres's radio traffic. No fatalities by the sound of it, but no Harrington. No sign of where they had taken him. No signal, no communication, nothing but the dead tracker and the 47-character encryption signature and the name of a Russian mercenary who set traps inside traps and had specifically deliberately sent a message that he was waiting for whoever was brave enough to come find him. She looked at Briggs. He's not in the corridor, she said. No, Briggs agreed. He's in a compound. Volkov moved him before the ambush was even sprung. The ambush was never about keeping Harrington. It was about drawing response forces, measuring what we'd send, measuring how we'd react. Briggs was very still. And now Volkov knows exactly what our QRF looks like, he said slowly. What our response time is, what our tactical approach is. Yes, Rachel said, he's building a picture. He's been building it for 8 months, she said, and tonight we just gave him 2 more data points. A silence moved between them. The desert around them had gone quiet, the firefight below settling into the aftermath of itself, the particular specific silence of a battlefield where the immediate violence has ended and the cost of it is just beginning to be calculated. Rachel's radio crackled again. This time it was not Torres. This time it was a voice she did not immediately recognize coming in on the base frequency, and then she recognized it because she had been hearing it all day, issuing orders with the certainty of a man who had not yet learned what certainty cost. Ghost, this is Captain Sparser. I have read your report. I need you to respond immediately. What is your position? What is your status? And a pause, not a tactical pause, a different kind of pause, the kind that costs something to end. And I need you to tell me where Harrington is. Rachel held the radio for a moment. She looked at Briggs. He looked back at her with an expression that said the decision was entirely hers. She keyed the transmit button. Captain Mercer, she said, I know exactly where Harrington is. I've known since 1400 hours. You are not going to like the answer, and you are not going to like what it takes to get him back. She paused. But that's all right, sir, because you don't have to do it. She released the transmit button, picked up her rifle, looked south toward the deeper desert, toward the darkness where a compound sat waiting, and a man named Volkov sat inside it already knowing she was coming. How far? Briggs said quietly. Rachel checked her device, ran the numbers one more time. 14 kilometers, she said, through open ground. On foot. Part of it, yes. He looked at her steadily. You understand what we're walking into. Yes, she said. Volkov knows you're coming. I know. He wants you to come. She shouldered the rifle, stood up from the ridgeline position, looked at him with the same dark eyes that had watched everything cataloged and everything waded through everything, the dismissals and the cold tea and the empty reports and the long weeks of being invisible in a room full of people who were certain she had nothing worth hearing. I know he wants me to come, she said. That's the first mistake he's made. She started moving south. Briggs looked at the sky for a fraction of a second, then he followed her. Behind them at FOB Sentinel, Captain Mercer stood at the communication station with Rachel Dawson's report in his hand, reading a sentence in the final paragraph that he had missed the first time through a sentence that had been there since 0500, sitting in his unread inbox while the desert did exactly what she had told him it was going to do. The sentence read, "The most dangerous element of this operation is not the ambush itself. It is what the ambush is designed to produce. Every response we send into that corridor becomes intelligence for the architect. He is not trying to hold a commander. He is trying to understand us. And once he understands us completely, the commander becomes expendable." Mercer set the tablet down. He looked at the dead tracker screen. He looked at the corner station, the empty chair, the 2 stacked folders, the cold mug. "God help us," he said quietly to no one in particular. And 14 kilometers to the south, Rachel Dawson moved through the darkness with a rifle on her back and a dead man's legacy in her chest, and the absolute bone-deep certainty of someone who has been underestimated her entire life and has decided on this particular night that the time for being invisible is over. They moved south for 40 minutes without speaking. The desert at night had its own particular silence, the kind that isn't empty, but full of small sounds and shifting air, and the specific pressure of open space on every side of you. Rachel moved through it with the kind of economy that comes from years of training, the body to cost nothing, to spend no energy on anything that wasn't forward motion. Briggs kept pace without difficulty. For a man his size, he moved with a quietness that most people half his age couldn't match. At the 20-minute mark, Rachel held up a fist and they stopped. She crouched. Briggs crouched beside her without a word. She had heard something. Not loud, not close, just a displacement of air and sound that didn't belong to the desert. She stayed completely still for 40 seconds, her eyes moving in a slow, methodical arc, her breathing barely detectable. Then she identified it. A patrol. 2 men moving parallel to their position, approximately 200 meters to the east heading north. Not searching, routine sweep. Volkov ran his perimeter the way a professional ran everything: regular, predictable, disciplined. Predictable was useful. She watched the patrol pass. She gave it 90 seconds after they disappeared from her range of hearing. Then she moved again, adjusting her angle slightly west. Briggs moved with her, said nothing. At the 40-minute mark, she stopped again. This time, she didn't crouch. She turned to face him. "The compound is 600 meters ahead," she said. Her voice was barely above a breath. "Single perimeter fence reinforced at the northwest and southeast corners. Main structure is a converted storage facility 3 rooms deep. Harrington will be in the deepest room. That's standard procedure for high-value detention, maximum distance from any entry point, maximum time for the guards to respond to a breach." Briggs looked at her for a moment. Then he said very quietly, "You've been inside." It was not a question. "Not this compound," she said, "but 3 facilities built by the same contractor using the same basic layout. Volkov is methodical. He uses what works. And you know this because I studied him," she said, "for 8 months, the same 8 months he's been operating in this corridor." She paused. "While I was filing supply chain reports." Something moved through Briggs's face. Not surprise exactly. More like the final settling of a picture that had been assembling itself piece by piece since the moment he walked over to her corner station and used her first name. "JSOC, he said. "Classified," she said. "Your brother was Task Force Orange," he said. "Before Fallujah, I knew him from a joint operation in—" He stopped himself. Old habit. Even now, even here, with no one for 600 meters in any direction, the instinct toward operational security was automatic. "He was the best I ever worked with," he said instead. Rachel looked at him for a moment. Something happened in her eyes that she didn't allow to reach the rest of her face. "I know," she said. "He told me you were the best he ever worked with, too." Briggs was quiet. "He talked about you at his last briefing," she said. "Before the operation. He said if anything ever went sideways, if he ever needed someone who understood the difference between following orders and doing the right thing, he'd want Briggs in the room." The desert held the silence between them for a moment. Then Briggs said, "What do you need me to do?" 1930 hours. The base radio room at FOB Sentinel had become a different kind of place in the last hour. The organized efficiency of a functioning operations center had given way to something rawer and more honest, the controlled desperation of a command structure dealing with the consequences of its own failures in real time. Torres and the surviving QRF members had made it back 40 minutes ago. 2 men with serious wounds, 4 with minor ones, and a sergeant named Torres, who had walked through the vehicle bay door looking 10 years older than when he had left and gone immediately to find Captain Mercer. The conversation between them lasted 4 minutes. Most people in the base weren't privy to what was said, but the ones who were close enough reported that it was not the kind of conversation where the junior man does most of the listening. Torres had stood in front of Mercer with his hands at his sides and blood on his sleeve that wasn't his own, and he had spoken in the measured, deliberate way of a man who has looked at something terrible and decided the only response to it is absolute honesty. Sir Sharam, Torres had said, "We were dead in that corridor. We were completely pinned. 2 men down, medic, hit no lateral movement possible, and then the overwatch just stopped. One by one, and whoever did it didn't miss. Not once. All I can tell you is that I heard a woman's voice on a frequency I've never used tell me to stay behind the MRAP and push left flank in 8 minutes, and that's exactly what happened." Mercer had looked at him. He had looked at the blood on Torres's sleeve. "You're saying analyst Dawson." "I don't know who she is, sir," Torres had said. "I just know she wasn't an analyst." That conversation had ended, and Mercer had gone back to the communication station, and he had been standing there ever since trying to raise Rachel on the operational channel, getting nothing but silence. He had read her report 4 times now. The 4th time he had read it, not as a commander reading an intelligence document, but as a man reading a record of his own failure sentence by sentence, with the particular intimacy of someone who recognizes himself in a mirror he wasn't expecting to find. She had been right about everything. Not mostly right, not right in general terms, right about the specific grid reference for the Eastern Overwatch, right about the communications dead zone, right about the timing, right about the pattern of the enemy's operation and the intelligence it was designed to gather. Every single thing she had written in that report at 5 in the morning had come true with the precision of a forecast from someone who understood the weather, not because they had studied it, but because they could feel it. And he had dismissed her. Because she was logistics, because she was a desk officer, because she had walked in with tea instead of coffee and spoken in complete sentences instead of tactical shorthand, and he had decided in the first 30 seconds of knowing her that she existed in a category of person whose observations he was not required to take seriously. He stood at the communications station and lived with that. The young specialist Alvarez came to stand beside him at 2000 hours. He held a printed document. Sir, Alvarez said, "I ran a background check on analyst Dawson. Through official channels." He paused. "The file is classified at a level I don't have access to, but the cover sheet, the part I can see, has a JSOC header and a unit designation I've never seen before, and the photo on the cover sheet is hers, but the name under it isn't Dawson." Mercer looked at the document. He looked at the classification header. He looked at the photo. He said very quietly, "What name is under it?" Alvarez hesitated. "Ghost," he said. "Just Ghost." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Mercer straightened. He picked up the radio. He keyed it. "All units, all stations. This is Captain Mercer. We have a JSOC asset in the field moving on the Harrington extraction. She is operating without support. I want everything we have ready to launch the moment she calls for it. Everything. No hesitation, no delays, no questions. If she calls, we go." "Understood." A chorus of acknowledgments came back. Steady, immediate. Mercer set the radio down. He looked at Torres, who was still standing near the doorway. "Get your men ready, Ohaishwad." Torres nodded, and then he said something that Mercer would think about for a long time afterward. "Sir, next time someone puts a report on your desk, read it." He walked out. 2015 hours. Rachel was at the compound fence. She had covered the last 600 meters in just under 18 minutes, which was slower than she would have liked because Volkov's patrol pattern was tighter than expected. 4 teams instead of the standard 2 rotating in overlapping cycles that left almost no gap longer than 90 seconds at any given point along the perimeter. Almost no gap. She had found the gap at the northwest corner. 63 seconds between patrol cycles right where the fence met a section of reinforced wall that created a blind spot to the southeast tower. 63 seconds was enough. It wasn't comfortable, but it was enough. She had gone through alone. Briggs was positioned at the ridge 200 meters back with the spotting scope and the radio. That was his role now. Her eyes outside the wire, her communication linked to Mercer in the last line of defense if everything inside went wrong. Before she went through the fence, he had grabbed her arm. Not hard, just a contact. The way you hold someone when words aren't adequate but complete silence feels like abandonment. Your brother would want you to come back from this, he said. She had looked at him for a moment. I know, she said. That's why I'm going to. She went through the fence. Now she was inside the compound, pressed against the exterior wall of the main structure, controlling her breathing, listening. Inside, she could hear voices. 3 distinct voices in what she estimated was the front room. Speaking in Russian in an accented English, which meant at minimum 1 native and 2 mixed background fighters consistent with Volkov's known recruitment pattern. Mercenaries drawn from at least 3 different national backgrounds. Professionals. Expensive. She moved toward the side entrance. The handle was not locked. That was either an oversight or a trap. She assumed trap. She moved past it and found the maintenance panel 12 meters further along the wall, exactly where the building contractor's standard layout would have placed it. She pried it open with 4 seconds of quiet work. Moved inside. The maintenance corridor was narrow and dark and smelled of dust and old concrete and fear, that last one, not a smell exactly, but a presence, the accumulated psychic residue of people who had been kept in a place like this and not been allowed to leave it on their own terms. She moved through it toward the far end, toward the deepest room. She stopped at the junction point where the maintenance corridor met the main interior. She listened. The voices from the front room were clearer now. She could make out full sentences. He's not talking, one voice said. Russian accent heavily inflected. Hasn't said anything useful in 6 hours. He doesn't need to talk, a second voice said. Calmer, colder, accented differently, Eastern European but not Russian. He just needs to breathe. He's the bait, not the catch. A pause. The catch is coming, the second voice said. Volkov is certain of it. And when she comes, a longer pause. Volkov says she won't be taken alive. The second voice again. Matter of fact, the way you discuss logistics. He says she's too dangerous to attempt capture. He wants her eliminated on sight. He says, the voice stopped, a sound of something being set down on a hard surface. He says it's personal. Rachel stood in the maintenance corridor and absorbed this information with the same stillness with which she absorbed everything. Not alarmed by it, not surprised. She had known this was personal from the moment she identified the encryption signature. Volkov had left it there deliberately, a calling card, a challenge. He hadn't just recognized her work in the operational pattern that had been disrupting his network for 18 months. He had invited her here. Personal. She filed it, moved forward. The door to the deepest room was sealed with a deadbolt from the outside. Standard, expected. She had the tool for it in the side pocket of her vest, a compact bypass pick that she had been carrying for 4 years and used 11 times. 12 now. The bolt turned in 8 seconds. She pushed the door open 6 inches and stopped. Inside, in the near-dark, Michael Harrington. He was seated against the far wall with his wrists zip-tied behind him and his ankles similarly bound. His face was a record of the last several hours written in bruise and dried blood and the particular blankness that men adopt when they have decided that showing pain is a tactical concession they aren't willing to make. He was conscious. Barely. His eyes were open but unfocused, aimed at the middle distance where people aim when they are managing agony by removing themselves from it. Rachel slipped through the door, pulled it to behind her, crossed the room in 6 steps. She crouched in front of him and put her hand on his shoulder and said very quietly, Commander Harrington. His eyes moved, slowly, came to rest on her face. He stared at her for a long moment. She watched him process what he was seeing. A woman he knew as a logistics analyst crouched in front of him in an enemy compound in the middle of the desert with a precision rifle on her back and eyes that were not the eyes of a logistics analyst. Dawson, he said. His voice was rough, abraded like a voice that had been used hard and then left to dry out. Yes, sir. He stopped, looked at her again. Something was reorganizing itself behind his eyes, a puzzle reshaping into a new configuration. You're not logistics. No, sir. How long? Long enough, she said. She was already working on the zip ties at his wrists with a small blade. How badly are you hurt? He considered the question with the seriousness of a man who has learned that honest damage assessment is more useful than courage. Ribs, at least 2 cracked, maybe 3. Left knee is swollen. They used it on me during questioning. Head took some hits, but I'm thinking clearly. Can you walk? I can walk, he said. Then after a pause, I can run if I have to. You might have to, she said. The zip tie gave, his wrists came free. He brought his hands around and looked at them for a moment, the specific private relief off of a man getting his own hands back. Then he reached forward and helped her with the ankle restraint. Dawson, he said as she worked. How did you later, she said. How many are there? Confirmed 3 in the front room. Patrol teams outside 4 of them. Volkov's position is unknown. He's not in the front room or I'd have heard his voice. Volkov, Harrington said. The name landed differently in his mouth than it had in hers. Heavier, personal in a different way. You know him, she said. He introduced himself, Harrington said. His voice was flat and controlled. He wanted me to know who was holding me. He said it was important for me to understand that this wasn't random, that it was planned specifically, that he stopped. That what Rachel said. Harrington looked at her steadily, and in his eyes was something that realigned everything she thought she understood about tonight. He said it was planned specifically because of you, Harrington said. He said he's been watching your operational pattern for 18 months. He said you've cost him 4 network nodes and 2 operational cells and 11 men who were worth more than anything else he's lost in the last decade. He paused. He said capturing me was the cleanest way to get you into the open, where he could see you, where he stopped again, where he could finish it, Rachel said. Yes, Harrington said. The ankle tie gave. He was free. He stood, slowly with the particular careful authority of a man reassembling himself from the inside out. He was taller than she remembered from the base, broader. She handed him the sidearm she'd brought for him, a secondary weapon, nothing fancy but solid and loaded. He took it, checked the chamber with the automatic efficiency of someone whose hands remember things his mind doesn't have to manage. What's our exit? He said. Maintenance corridor to the northwest exterior. Gap in the patrol cycle, 63 seconds opens in. She checked her watch. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. And if the patrol cycle has changed, then we improvise, she said. He looked at her for a moment, and then with the bruised and blood-dried face and the cracked ribs and the knee that was going to make every step cost something real, Commander Michael Harrington did something that she did not expect. He smiled. Lead the way, he said. She turned toward the door, and then the radio on her vest crackled. Briggs, tight and urgent, barely above a whisper. Ghost, you have a problem. Volkov's position is confirmed. He's not in the compound. She stopped. Say again, she said. He's outside the compound. He moved position 40 minutes ago. He's on the high ground, northwest ridge, 400 meters out. He has a line of sight on your exit point. A pause, half a second long enough to mean something. Ghost, he's waiting at your door. Harrington heard it. She could tell by the way he went still behind her. She looked at the door to the maintenance corridor. 4 minutes and 8 seconds to the patrol gap. 1 exit point. 1 man waiting at it with 400 meters of open ground and a rifle and 18 months of very specific preparation. Briggs, she said, can you see him? Yes. Can you reach him? The pause this time was longer. 400 meters from Briggs's position to Volkov's ridge. Angle of approach. Wind. The dark. Marginal, Briggs said. It's a marginal shot from here. I can try to... Don't try, Rachel said. A mist tells him exactly where we are. Silence. Harrington stepped up beside her. He spoke quietly. What are our options? 1 exit point, she said. 1 man blocking it who knew we'd be here. Alternative exits. The front entrance through 3 armed guards. So we go through the guards, Harrington said. It was not bravado. It was arithmetic. The way soldiers do math. There's a 3rd option, Rachel said. He waited. I go out the front, she said. I draw Volkov's attention. You take the maintenance corridor when the patrol gap opens. You get to Briggs' position. Harrington looked at her. His jaw tightened. That's not a 3rd option. That's you trading yourself for me. That's me using myself as a variable, she said. There's a difference. There really isn't, he said. Dawson, His voice came out harder than she expected. Not anger exactly, something more specific than anger. I have been sitting in that room for 6 hours because someone underestimated the threat and sent me in without adequate intelligence. I am not going to walk out of here while someone else takes the hit for it. Not tonight, not ever. She looked at him. In the dark room with the sound of guards moving in the corridor beyond, and the clock running on the patrol gap, and a Russian mercenary sitting 400 meters away on a ridge, waiting for the only door she had planned to use, she looked at him and understood something. He was not going to leave without her. She could argue it tactically for 10 minutes, and he would stand there with his cracked ribs and his swollen knee and his recovered sidearm and refuse to move, which meant they went together, through the front. Okay, she said, together, but you stay behind me and you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. No hesitation, no improvisation. Agreed, he said immediately. I mean exactly, she said. I know what exactly means, he said. She unslung the rifle. In the narrow space, it was less useful than the sidearm she kept in her right hand. She passed the rifle to him. You know how to use a precision system, she said. I've been shooting since I was 12 years old, he said. Good. If Volkov gets a line of sight on us in the open, I'll handle it, he said. She looked at him one more time. He looked back at her with the steady, bruised, absolutely unbroken face of a man who has decided that the only direction available to him is forward. Move on my signal, she said. She put her hand on the door. She pulled it open. And everything that happened in the next 4 minutes happened very fast. The first guard came around the corner of the main corridor at the exact moment the door opened, and Rachel was already moving before he had completed the motion of raising his weapon, a controlled strike to the throat that dropped him silently, and she caught him before he hit the floor and lowered him without a sound. Harrington was through the door behind her before the guard's knees finished folding. The second guard was further along the corridor, back-turned, radio in hand. Rachel covered the distance between them in 6 steps. The guard began to turn at step 4, some animal instinct alerting him a half-second too late, and she had him controlled and down before he completed the rotation. She looked back at Harrington. He was moving well better than she had expected from a man with cracked ribs, adrenaline doing what adrenaline does. Third guard front room heard them coming. He had time to shout once, just once, and then the compound erupted. From outside, Volkov's radio would have crackled with that shout. He would have understood what it meant. He would have shifted position, adjusted angle, begun the patient, lethal calculation of a sniper who has just been told his target is moving. Rachel and Harrington came through the front of the compound at a dead run. The patrol teams were already converging from 2 directions. She could hear them, the coordinated, rapid movement of men who have trained for exactly this contingency. Left, she called. They went left. The patrol team from the north came around the corner, hard and fast, and ran directly into Harrington, who had been a commander for 20 years and a soldier for 23, and the rifle he was carrying came up with the reflexive speed of a man whose muscle memory has been doing this longer than the men in front of him have been alive. He bought them 8 seconds. 8 seconds of chaos and cover fire, and the particular violence of 2 people who have decided they are going home. Rachel pulled him. They ran. Open ground, the northwest corridor, 400 meters of sight line to Volkov's ridge. She heard the shot before she felt it, a sound that is less a bang and more a physical displacement of air at very high velocity, and the sensation that followed it was not pain immediately, but impact high on her left shoulder, spinning her half around, and her legs kept moving because the mind has already sent that instruction before the body has finished registering the damage. Ghost, Briggs's voice on the radio, urgent and raw. Still moving, she called back. Harrington's hand caught her arm, steadied her. They kept running. She heard Volkov's second shot miss wide. He'd had to adjust. She'd moved unpredictably when the first hit spun her, and that half-second of recalculation had cost him his clean second shot. 200 meters to Briggs's position. Her shoulder was telling her things she didn't have time to listen to. She ran. Behind them from the ridge, 400 meters northwest, Ivan Volkov lowered his rifle for the first time in 8 minutes. He watched the 2 figures moving through the dark. He watched them reach the ridge line where the old man with the spotting scope was positioned. He did not fire again. Not yet. He picked up his radio. She's hit, he said. She's moving. She'll stop when the adrenaline stops. A pause. The cold professional pause of a man who has survived 30 years in the most dangerous occupation in the world by being patient. We follow. We find her when she can't run anymore. He began to move. Patient, methodical, absolutely certain. He had been hunting Rachel Dawson for 18 months. He could wait a little longer. She reached Briggs at a dead run and nearly went down when her left leg decided that the message from her shoulder had finally arrived and deserved a response. Briggs caught her with both arms, the full weight of her, and held her upright with the effortless solidity of a man who had been catching broken people for 30 years. "Let me see it," he said. "No time," she said. "Rachel." The first name again, the key in the lock. "Let me see it." She stopped fighting him. He pulled back the left side of her vest with quick, practiced hands. Harrington was beside them now, breathing hard, rifle still up, scanning the dark behind them, with the focused attention of a man who has just remembered exactly what he is. "Through and through," Briggs said. His voice was steady, but his hands were moving faster than steady. "High shoulder, missed the bone. You've got muscle damage, and you're bleeding, but it didn't hit anything that kills you." "Good," she said. "Then we move. I need 30 seconds to pack it." 20 wham, she said. He packed it in 19. She didn't make a sound while he did it. Harrington watched her face during those 19 seconds and saw nothing there that resembled self-pity. What he saw instead was a woman running an internal inventory, cataloging what worked and what didn't, and filing the results for immediate operational use. "Left arm is going to weaken," Briggs said, securing the field dressing with 2 strips of tape. "You'll lose grip strength within the hour." "I know," she said. "That affects your shooting." "I know," she said again. She picked up her rifle with her right hand, tested the grip, made an adjustment. "It doesn't affect it enough." Harrington said, "He's going to follow us." "Yes," Rachel said. "How far back?" "He won't rush," she said. "Volkov doesn't rush. He'll move deliberately to stay off the obvious routes, use his patrol teams to bracket our position. He's going to hurt us." She paused, pressing her right hand briefly against the packed dressing as though confirming it was real. "He wants us moving in a direction of his choosing." "Which direction is that?" Briggs said. Rachel looked south, then west. Then she looked at the terrain ahead of them and ran the calculation that had been assembling itself in the back of her mind since Briggs told her Volkov was on the northwest ridge. "There's a natural choke point 4 kilometers west," she said. "Rocky outcrop, single approach from the east. High ground on 3 sides. If he positions 2 teams there and drives us toward it with the patrol sweeps." "We walk into a box," Harrington said. "A very small box," she said, "with no exits." The 3 of them stood for a moment in the specific silence of people who have just mapped the shape of the problem they're inside. Then Briggs said, "So we don't go west." "We have to go west," Rachel said. "The base is northwest. It's the only direction that takes us home." "Then we choose our own route through the choke point," Briggs said. "No," Rachel said. "We choose when we arrive at it." Harrington looked at her. Something was working behind his eyes, the tactical mind reasserting itself through the exhaustion and the pain. "You want to get there before his teams do." "I want to get there before he expects us to," she said. "Volkov is patient because he believes we have to be slow. He's watching my shoulder. He thinks the wound buys him time." She looked at both of them steadily. "We move fast, faster than he thinks we can. We reach the outcrop before his teams are positioned, and we use the high ground ourselves." Briggs looked at Harrington. Harrington looked at Rachel. "How fast?" Harrington said. 4 kilometers in 35 minutes, she said. A pause, cracked ribs, swollen knee, gunshot shoulder, open desert terrain in the dark. "Let's move," Harrington said. 252 hours. They ran when the terrain allowed it and moved fast when it didn't, and nobody said anything about what it cost because saying it would have made it cost more. Rachel set the pace. Her shoulder burned with every step in a way that was specific and insistent, the kind of pain that doesn't fade into background noise, but stays in the foreground, narrating itself constantly. She ran through it the way she ran through everything she had decided not to let stop her. At kilometer 2, Briggs's radio crackled. The Sentinel base frequency. Mercer's voice controlled, but carrying something underneath it that hadn't been there this morning. "Ghost, this is Sentinel Actual. We have your position from last transmission. I have 2 helicopter assets staged and ready. Say the word and they're in the air. Repeat, we are ready to come to you. Just say the word. Rachel looked at the radio without slowing her pace. Not yet, she said into it. Helicopters announce our position. Volkov hears rotors. He accelerates his teams. We need ground approach, then extraction. A pause from Mercer's end. Copy that, he said. Your call, Ghost. Your call, completely. Another pause shorter. I've got Torres and 8 men ready to move on foot, armed and staged. Give me a direction. Rachel looked at Harrington. He was running with his left arm tight against his body, compensating for the ribs, and his face was doing the arithmetic of endurance in real time. He caught her looking and gave a single nod. He was still here. He was still in. Mercer, she said into the radio, send Torres due west from the base perimeter. Foot pace. Tell him to maintain radio silence until he hears from me. He'll understand what that means. He says he does, Mercer said with a slight adjustment in his voice that told her Torres was standing right next to him. Torres is moving now. She clipped the radio back to her vest and ran. At kilometer 3, Briggs went down. Not from enemy fire, not from anything dramatic. He stepped on a section of unstable ground that gave way without warning, and his right ankle turned with a crack that Rachel heard from 8 meters ahead of him. She was back beside him in 4 seconds. He was already trying to get up. She could tell from his face that it was bad. How bad, she said. He put weight on it experimentally. His jaw tightened in the specific way of a man who is familiar with pain and is currently receiving more input than he budgeted for. I can move, he said. How fast, she said. A pause that told her everything. She looked at Harrington. He was already moving toward Briggs's other side. We're not leaving him, Harrington said. It wasn't a discussion. I wasn't suggesting it, Rachel said. They got Briggs between them, one arm over each of their shoulders, and they moved. Slower now. Significantly slower. The math of 35 minutes to 4 kilometers had just changed, and all 3 of them knew it, and none of them said it because the saying of it would have cost something they didn't have to spend. Volkov's going to reach the outcrop first, Briggs said through his teeth after 2 minutes of this. Maybe, Rachel said. Not maybe, he said. We're moving at half speed. He's going to be positioned when we get there. Yes, she said. So your plan? The plan changed, she said. The plan changes when the situation changes. That's what planning is for. He was quiet for a moment, moving through pain with the grimly determined silence of a man who has decided that if he has to hurt this much, he can at least do it without complaining about it. What's the new plan? Harrington said. Rachel was quiet for 4 steps. 5. 6. The new plan, she said finally, is that we get to the outcrop as fast as we can and then we deal with whatever's there. That's not a plan, Briggs said. That's a statement of intent. Yes, she said, but right now it's what we have. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. The terrain allowed for nothing more. 2,130 hours. They reached the rocky outcrop at the 48-minute mark instead of 35. 13 minutes slower than Rachel had needed. 13 minutes that she had spent calculating and recalculating and arriving at the same answer every time, which was that 13 minutes was enough time for Volkov to move 2 teams into position and enough time for a man of his precision and patience to have set up exactly the kind of waiting situation that she had described at the ridgeline 40 minutes ago. The outcrop was a series of large rock formations rising from the desert floor, natural cover in every direction, high ground on 3 sides. Beautiful terrain for defense, or for a trap, the difference depending entirely on who got there first. They stopped 20 meters out. Rachel eased Briggs down against a low rock, his back against the solid stone, his rifle in his hands. He was breathing hard but controlled. He looked at her with eyes that were clear despite everything. Tell me what you need, he said. Cover this approach, she said. Anyone comes through from the east, you stop them. And if Volkov's already inside the outcrop, she looked at the rock formations ahead. Somewhere in the dark, the silence was doing something that silence does when it has company. The slight specific density of occupied space. He is inside, she said quietly. I can feel it. Briggs looked at her. He had been in enough situations like this one to know that some people developed a sense for human presence that couldn't be adequately explained and was worth treating as real information. Then be careful, he said. She started to move. He reached out and touched her arm again. The same contact as before, the same specific weight of something that couldn't quite become words. Rachel, she stopped. Your brother went into Fallujah knowing that he said. He knew before the operation launched that it was compromised. He went anyway because his people were already inside and he couldn't leave them. She was very still. I know, she said. I couldn't stop him, Briggs said. I tried. His voice had changed, dropped to something fundamental and unarmored. I tried and I couldn't, and I have thought about it every day for 9 years. She looked at him for a moment. This large, steady, unbreakable man who had carried that weight for 9 years never set it down. You're not going to lose another one, she said. Not tonight. She moved into the outcrop. Harrington went with her without being asked. She could have told him to stay with Briggs. She didn't because she already knew what his answer would be, and they didn't have time for the conversation. Inside the rock formations, the dark was different, closer. The stone walls absorbed sound and redirected it in ways that made distance unreliable. She moved with both hands on the sidearm, now rifle-slung left arm compensating for the shoulder through sheer controlled tension. She heard the first man before she saw him. A breath, a small shift of weight on stone. She stopped, moved 2 steps left, came around a rock formation from a direction the man wasn't facing. He went down without a sound. Harrington was 4 feet behind her, the entire time moving in her footsteps with the specific, careful trust of a man who has decided that the person ahead of him knows what they're doing and the best thing he can do is not interfere with it. Second man, 30 seconds later, north side of the formation. He heard them coming and turned, and there was a brief, controlled struggle in the dark that produced 2 sounds, both quiet, and then he was down. Rachel stood in the quiet for 3 seconds, breathing, listening. Then Harrington's hand came to her shoulder, her right shoulder, careful, deliberate, and he didn't say anything but the pressure of it said, I'm here. She moved deeper. The outcrop's highest point was a natural platform of flat rock approximately 8 meters above the desert floor, accessible by a single narrow channel between 2 large formations. The high ground, the obvious position for a man of Volkov's capability and patience, the place she would have chosen. She moved toward the channel and stopped, because Ivan Volkov was standing at the top of it, looking down at her with his rifle pointed at her chest, and the absolute stillness of a man who has not been surprised, who has been waiting, who has had this moment planned since the beginning of the evening and possibly much longer than that. He was taller than she had imagined from his file. His face was unremarkable in the way that the faces of men who have survived the longest in the most dangerous occupations are sometimes unremarkable. No distinguishing features. Nothing that would make you look twice in a crowd, everything calibrated toward invisibility. Except his eyes. His eyes were the eyes of someone who was entirely present, entirely focused, entirely committed to the immediate moment. Professional eyes. She had seen them in the mirror. Rachel Dawson, what he said, his English was nearly perfect, just the faint architecture of a Slavic language underneath it. You are smaller than I expected. You are exactly what I expected, she said. He smiled slightly. I read your file, as much of it as exists. There are large gaps, your people are careful, but the pattern of your work is in the gaps. Anyone who knows how to look can find it. He paused. I have been looking for a long time. 18 months, she said. 18 months, he confirmed. 4 network nodes, 2 operational cells, 11 men. He said it without heat, without anger, as a recitation of fact. You cost me something that cannot be replaced. Not the men can be replaced. The time, the architecture, 18 months of construction. Good, she said. He looked at her steadily. You are alone. I am, she said. It was a lie, and they both knew it probably was, but he also knew that the man behind her was a compromised commander with cracked ribs and a borrowed sidearm, and Volkov had done his arithmetic. The old man is outside, Volkov said. Hurt. Stationary. He tilted his head slightly. I heard him go down at kilometer 3. Sound carries in the desert. Rachel felt something move through her, cold and specific. He had been tracking them for the entire 4 kilometers. Patient, listening, letting them come to him. You could have taken us at any point, she said. Yes, he said, but you wanted it here. I wanted it face to face, he said, not at distance. Anyone can kill at distance. I wanted to look at you and understand what has been costing me 18 months of my life. He paused. And I wanted you to understand that it ends tonight. He began to raise the rifle. Harrington stepped out from behind her. Not with a weapon raised, he stepped out with his hands visible and his body between Rachel and Volkov's rifle in the specific, deliberate, absolute way of a man who has made a decision about what his life is worth and what it is worth it for. Harrington, Rachel said sharp and low. You want to understand something? Harrington said to Volkov, his voice carrying the full authority of a man who is standing between a bullet and another human being and has somehow found a way to be calm about it. I'll tell you something worth understanding. She came here alone. She came in with nothing but a rifle and the information in her head, and she walked into your compound and got me out. And you had every advantage. You planned this for 8 months. You had the terrain. You had the patrol teams. You had the overwatch. He paused, and she still walked through it like it wasn't there. Volkov's eyes moved from Rachel to Harrington, a calculation running. Step aside, Volkov said. Quiet, certain. No, Harrington said. Rachel was moving before Volkov's attention had fully returned to her. 2 steps left and down, breaking the line of his aim, bringing up her sidearm with her right hand. She heard the rifle discharge, the sound of it immense in the enclosed rock space, and felt the round pass close enough to her right ear to be a physical sensation. Then she was below the line of fire and moving up and forward. Volkov was already adapting. Fast. Professional. He brought the rifle around with the ease of a man who has done this in actual conditions many times. She reached him before he completed the arc. What happened in the next 40 seconds was not graceful. It was not the choreographed competence of a training demonstration. It was close and brutal and absolutely committed. 2 people with extensive training and no remaining patience applying everything they had learned to a single immediate problem. Volkov was stronger than her. She was faster. He had the high ground briefly, then lost it. She had the angle briefly, then lost it. The rifle came free and skidded off the rock platform. The sidearm in her right hand was the only weapon either of them had. He got his hand on her right wrist. He was very strong. She felt the bones compress and her grip on the sidearm compromised, and for 2 full seconds she was losing. Then her left arm came up the damaged shoulder, screaming at her in the loudest terms it had yet found, and she drove her elbow into the side of his head with everything that was left in that arm. His grip broke. She twisted, brought the sidearm around. Volkov caught her wrist again, faster than she expected. He was hurt. She could see it, blood from his temple, something wrong with his left side, but he was still here, still fighting, still the kind of man who does not stop until someone makes him. They stood locked 2 feet apart, his hand on her wrist. The sidearm between them pointed at nothing useful to either of them. He looked at her face. She looked at his. You're better than I expected, he said through blood and controlled breathing. I know, she said. His other hand came up toward her throat. The shot came from behind her, not loud, relatively speaking. The sidearm Harrington was carrying produced a sound that was sharp and definitive and final in the way of things that cannot be undone. Volkov's body registered it before his face did. The hand that had been reaching for her throat stopped in the air. He looked down. He looked at her, and something in his professional, patient-focused eyes did the thing that eyes do when the accounting is complete and the math comes out the way it was always going to. He went down. Rachel stood over him for 2 seconds. Her shoulder was telling her things that she was going to have to listen to very soon. Her legs were suggesting a conversation. She overruled both of them through sheer commitment to the next 60 seconds. She turned. Harrington was 3 feet behind her sidearm, up, both hands on it, the arms extended and steady, the way you learn to keep them steady in the first year of firearms training, and then spend the rest of your career maintaining through practice and discipline. His face was white under the bruising. His left arm was shaking slightly, the ribs making themselves known. But his aim had been, as she now had undeniable evidence, completely adequate. He lowered the weapon slowly. She looked at him. He looked at her. You said no improvisation, he said. She stared at him for a moment. Something moved through her chest that was not quite anything she had a name for. Yes, she said, I did say that. He holstered the sidearm. He exhaled once long and controlled the exhalation of a man releasing something he has been holding at full tension for several hours. Is he? Harrington started. Yes, she said. A silence. Good, he said. Her radio crackled. Briggs. His voice had changed, still controlled, but carrying something warm and electric underneath. I can hear Torres's team. They're 200 meters east. And Ghost? A pause. I can hear helicopters. She keyed the radio. Mercer? Ghost, go ahead. Mercer's voice, immediate, present. We need extraction at the rocky outcrop 4 kilometers due west of base perimeter. 3 personnel, 1 gunshot wound, 1 with multiple rib fractures, 1 sprained ankle. She paused. Target is down. I say again, primary target is down. A silence on Mercer's end that lasted exactly 2 seconds. Copy that, Ghost. Helicopters are already in the air. ETA 8 minutes. Torres. I can hear him, she said. Tell him to approach from the east and announce himself loudly. My colleague outside the outcrop is armed and in a lot of pain, and I would prefer not to add to tonight's complications. Something that was almost a sound of relief came through the radio from Mercer's end. Understood. Torres, you copy that. Torres' voice from somewhere close enough that she could almost hear it without the radio. Copy that. Approaching east, and I'm going to be loud about it. She put the radio away. She looked at Harrington. He was leaning against the rock face with his right hand pressed against his left side, compensating for the ribs. And his face was doing the thing that faces do in the first minutes after sustained adrenaline begins to withdraw. Not weakness, the opposite. The specific clarity that arrives when the immediate crisis is over and the body begins to take stock. Can you make it to Briggs? She said. Yes, he said. He straightened away from the rock, winced, straightened further. Can you? She considered the question honestly. Her left shoulder was something she was going to be dealing with for a significant period of time. Her legs were functioning but lodging formal complaints. Her right hand was bruised from Volkov's grip and would be stiffer tomorrow than it was right now. Yes, she said. Then let's go get him, Harrington said. They moved out of the rock formation together, back through the channel, back into the desert air. And the first thing she heard when they cleared the outcrop was Briggs's voice calling out quietly to Torres's team, confirming position, confirming identity. And the first thing she saw when she came around the last rock formation was Torres' blood still on his sleeve. Face tight with everything the last several hours had cost him, stopping dead when he saw her and Harrington coming out of the dark together. Torres stared at them for a full 3 seconds. Then he said to no one, specifically to the desert and the dark and the 8 men standing behind him, I'll be damned. Rachel reached Briggs. He was sitting where she had left him, rifle still in his hands, back against the rock. He looked up when she crouched in front of him. He looked at her face. He looked at her shoulder. He looked at Harrington standing behind her. Volkov, he said. Down, she said. He nodded once, slowly. The same nod as before, the one that means exactly what it means and nothing else. Your brother would have liked tonight, he said quietly. Rachel looked at him for a moment. He would have complained about the planning, she said. Something cracked in Briggs' face. The armor of 30 years, the bedrock steadiness, the absolute economy of expression, it cracked just enough to let through something human and irreducible. He laughed. Not loud, not long, but completely real. Above them, the sound of helicopter rotors was getting closer. Rachel looked up at the sky. 8 minutes exactly. She could set a watch by Mercer's people when they were properly motivated. Torres came to stand beside her. He looked at her shoulder. He looked at her face. You told me 8 minutes, he said. Yes, she said. Back in the corridor. You told me 8 minutes and to stay behind the MRAP. He paused. You didn't know me. You didn't know anything about me. And you asked me to trust you. Yes, she said. He looked at her for another moment. I want you to know, he said, that I have 6 men behind me who are all alive because of those 8 minutes. And I want you to know that I am going to remember what that means for the rest of my life. She looked at him, this man with the blood on his sleeve and the photograph of his daughter taped to every vehicle he drove. How old is she? Rachel said. He blinked. Sir Buang, your daughter, in the photograph. How old is she? He stared at her. 7, he said. She's going to have a father, Rachel said. That's all that matters. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The helicopters came in low and fast from the northwest, 2 of them kicking up the desert, in great roiling clouds, their landing lights cutting the dark into pieces. And into those pieces walked three people, one limping, one holding his side, one with a packed dressing on her left shoulder and a sidearm on her right hip, and eyes that had seen everything the last several hours had produced and had decided somewhere in the middle of all of it that she was going to be here at the end of them. The helicopters touched down. Harrington stopped beside her before they reached the first one. "Dawson," he said. She looked at him. "When this is over," he said, "when we're back at Sentinel and everyone's been patched up and the reports have been filed, I need to tell you something." "Sir." "I knew about the report," he said. "Your 5 o'clock report. Donnelly told me about it before he routed it to Mercer. He told me there was an analyst who had flagged serious concerns." He looked at her with the direct, unsparing honesty of a man choosing accountability over comfort. "I was already in the vehicle bay. I was already 20 minutes from launch. And I told Donnelly to route it through channels, and I got in the vehicle, and I drove out." Rachel was still. "I made the same mistake Mercer made," Harrington said. "Different reasons, maybe. Same result. I didn't listen." He held her gaze. "I'm sorry for that." She looked at him for a long moment. "You came back for me inside the compound," she said, "when I told you to run." "Yes," he said. "We'll call it even," she said. He looked at her, then he nodded, once, slowly. They walked to the helicopter together. The helicopter touched down at FOB Sentinel at 2240 hours. Rachel knew the exact time because she had been watching the clock on the pilot's instrument panel for the entire 8-minute flight. Not because she needed to know the time, but because her mind required something concrete to hold on to while her shoulder conducted its ongoing argument with the rest of her body about what the next several hours were going to look like. She stepped off the helicopter under her own power. That was important to her in a way she couldn't have fully articulated and didn't try to. She stepped off, both feet solid on the tarmac, left arm not moving, right hand free, and she stood for exactly 2 seconds and let the base reassemble itself around her. The vehicle bay was lit. People were moving. She could see the medical team coming toward them with the particular purposeful urgency of people who have been staged and waiting and are now finally able to do their job. She could see the operations building lit from inside shadows moving behind the windows. And she could see, standing at the edge of the tarmac in a line that was not quite formal and not quite informal, 12 men. Torres's team, minus the 2 who were already in medical, standing in the specific way that soldiers stand when they are not at attention but are giving something the full weight of their presence. They were looking at her. She looked back at them. 12 faces in the harsh tarmac, lighting all of them, carrying the specific worn-through quality of men who have been in a firefight and survived it and are still processing what that means. Torres was at the left end of the line. He nodded once when her eyes reached him. Well, a salute, something quieter than a salute, something that cost more. She nodded back. Then the medical team reached Harrington, and in the controlled chaos of triage and assessment took over. And Rachel let herself be moved toward the medical bay with a hand on her right arm that she didn't shake off because she had decided somewhere over the desert on the helicopter ride back that accepting help was not the same thing as needing to be saved. The medical bay at Sentinel was functional and efficient and smelled of antiseptic and the particular institutional quiet of a place where people come to be put back together. Rachel sat on an examination table while a Navy corpsman named Petty Officer Chen worked on her shoulder with hands that were precise and fast and utterly without drama, which she appreciated enormously. Harrington was 2 tables over. She could hear his voice low and steady answering the doctor's questions about the ribs with the measured honesty she had come to recognize as one of his fundamental qualities in the last several hours. "Yes, it hurts. No, I don't know exactly when it happened. Yes, I can breathe fully. No, not comfortably." Briggs was at the far end of the bay, his ankle elevated, arguing with the doctor about whether he needed an X-ray in a tone that suggested he had been arguing with doctors about this kind of thing for approximately 31 years and had strong opinions about it. "You heard it crack," the doctor said. "I've heard a lot of things crack," Briggs said. "That doesn't mean they need an X-ray." Sergeant Major with respect. "I walked 4 kilometers on it," Briggs said. "With these 2, I'm not complaining." Chen looked up from Rachel's shoulder and caught her eye. He was young, maybe 24, with the slightly overwhelmed expression of someone who has just processed the last several hours and hasn't quite finished. Is he always like that? Chen said quietly. Probably, Rachel said. Chen returned to her shoulder. He worked in silence for a minute. Then without looking up, he said, "That was you, in the corridor, the overwatch positions." Rachel said nothing. "Torres told us," Chen said, "when they came back. He told us about the voice on the radio, the woman who told him to stay behind the MRAP." He paused, his hands still moving. "He said you told him 8 minutes, and then exactly 8 minutes later, the ridge went quiet." Rachel looked at the far wall. "Torres had good instincts," she said. "He moved his men correctly." "He said you cleared 4 positions," Chen said. "From the ridgeline, alone." "I had a spotter," she said. Chen was quiet for a moment. He finished the stitching. He began to dress the wound with the same quiet efficiency. "I have a sister," he said. He said it simply without preamble, the way people sometimes offer something personal when they're trying to say something they don't have a direct word for. "She's the one who pushed me to enlist. She said someone has to be in the room when the decisions get made. Otherwise, the decisions get made without you." He applied the last strip of tape. "I think she'd like you." Rachel looked at him. This young man with the precise hands and the sister who had good ideas about rooms and decisions. "Tell her she's right," Rachel said. He nodded, stepped back. "You're done. The shoulder needs rest. Real rest for at least 3 weeks. The muscle damage is significant, and if you push it before it heals, you'll have chronic instability." "Understood," Rachel said. "I mean it," he said. "I know you mean it," she said. She got off the table. "Thank you, petty officer." She walked to Harrington's table. The doctor had finished with him. 3 cracked ribs confirmed the knee, significant but not structural, a mild concussion from the head impacts. He was sitting up, a fresh shirt replacing the one that had been cut off him, and he looked in the harsh medical bay lighting like a man who has been through something and arrived on the other side of it and is taking his first clear look around. He saw her coming. He watched her walk, assessing automatically the way commanders do, cataloging the damage and the function and the ratio between them. "The shoulder," he said. 3 weeks, she said. He winced slightly, not about his own pain. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be," she said. "It's a through and through. It'll heal." He looked at her for a moment. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing." "Rachel." He used her first name the way Briggs had used it, not casually but specifically. Like a choice. "Sit down." She sat down on the chair beside his table. He was quiet for a moment, looking at his hands. The zip tie marks were still visible on his wrists, red lines that would fade but hadn't yet. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to answer honestly, not operationally, not tactically, honestly." She waited. "When you walked into that compound tonight," he said, "when you went through the fence and through those corridors and into that room, were you afraid?" She looked at him steadily. She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Yes," she said. He nodded, like the answer confirmed something he'd needed confirmed. "Good," he said, "because I want you to know that what I saw tonight in that corridor at that outcrop, all of it, I've been in combat for 23 years. I have worked with operators at the highest level of capability this country produces, and I have never seen anything like what you did tonight." Rachel said nothing. "Not because of the shooting," he said. "The shooting was extraordinary, but that's not what I mean. I mean the thinking, the 8 months of thinking, the 5 o'clock report, the 2 seconds you spent calculating the patrol gap, the decision to go for the outcrop instead of away from it." He paused. "You understood the whole problem when everyone else was looking at the parts of it. That's the rarest thing I've ever seen." She looked at him. "I was ignored," she said. "The report sat unread." "I know," he said, "and that is a failure that I am going to spend a significant amount of time addressing when I am able to walk without looking like a man who lost an argument with a desert." He held her gaze, starting with Mercer. 2300 hours. Captain Daniel Mercer was standing in the doorway of the medical bay when Rachel walked out. He had clearly been there for some time. He had the look of a man who has been standing in a specific place long enough to have made peace with being there, but not with why he had to be. He was holding a folder. Her folder. The classified cover sheet with the JSOC header and the photograph and the name that wasn't Dawson. She stopped in front of him. He looked at the folder. He looked at her. "Ghost," he said. "Captain," she said. He was quiet for a moment. In the hallway behind him, she could see two of Torres' men moving past, and they slowed when they saw her. And one of them, a young corporal she didn't know by name, stopped completely and stood at attention for a full 3 seconds before continuing on. Mercer saw it. She saw him see it. "I owe you an apology," Mercer said. "Yes," she said, not to be cruel, because it was true and pretending otherwise would have cost them both something. And he absorbed that. "I dismissed you," he said, "based on nothing, based on the category I put you in before I knew anything about you." He looked at the folder in his hand. "I had the report. I didn't read it. 2 men are in that medical bay right now because I didn't read it." Rachel looked at him steadily. She had thought about what she would say to him in the abstract on the helicopter ride back. She had thought about it and then put it away because there were more immediate concerns. But standing here now with the medical bay behind her and the tarmac ahead and the full weight of the last 12 hours present in every part of her body that wasn't numb, she found that what she wanted to say was simpler than anything she had prepared. "There will be another analyst," she said, "somewhere in your career. Someone who comes to your table with a report or an observation or a concern, and they won't look the way you expect them to look or sound the way you expect them to sound. And your instinct will be to file them in the category that says, not relevant." She paused. "Remember tonight when that happens." He looked at her for a long moment. "I will," he said. It was not a reflexive answer. It was the answer of a man who has been changed by something and knows it and is not trying to minimize what changed him. She nodded once. She moved past him. He turned. "Dawson." She stopped. "The folder," he said. "I have questions about your assignment here, about who sent you and what they sent you for." She looked at him over her shoulder. "When you're ready to ask the right questions," she said, "I'll be ready to answer them." She walked out into the desert night. "Oi!" Briggs found her 20 minutes later. She was standing outside the operations building, looking north the direction the convoy had gone that morning. It felt like several days ago. It had been 15 hours. He was on crutches that he was using with a particular aggressive competence of a man who resented needing them, but understood the physics of the situation. His ankle was wrapped and confirmed fractured in 2 places, which he had received as information rather than as news. He came to stand beside her, said nothing for a minute. The base was quieter now. The crisis had passed into aftermath, and aftermath had its own particular sound, low voices, equipment being stowed, the specific settling of a place that has been at high tension and is now carefully coming down from it. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you," she said. "I'm old," he said. "My resting looks like this." She almost smiled. He looked at the northern horizon. "What happens now?" he said. "I file my report," she said. "The real one, full operational disclosure. Volkov's network, the inside access, questioned the 8 months of pattern analysis." She paused. "And then I go where they send me." "Another base," he said. "Another corner station." "Yes," she said. "Another cold cup of tea." "Probably." He was quiet for a moment. "Does it bother you?" he said. "The invisibility, being the person in the corner who everyone overlooks." She considered the question honestly, the way she considered everything without shortcuts. "It used to," she said, "in the beginning, when I was still young enough to want to be seen." She looked at the horizon. "Then I understood that invisible is a capability. The most dangerous person in any room is the one no one is watching." She paused. "My brother taught me that." Briggs was quiet. The sound of his breathing was slow and controlled beside her, the breathing of a man who has made his peace with the passage of time and the cost of service. "He taught me something too," Briggs said. "Your brother. He told me once we were on an operation somewhere I can't name, waiting in a position for about 6 hours for a window that kept not opening. He told me that the difference between people who last in this work and people who don't isn't strength or skill or even courage." He paused. He said it's the ability to believe that what you're doing matters, even when you're doing it alone, even when no one is watching, even when the person with the authority has decided you're not worth listening to. Rachel stood very still. "He believed that," she said. Her voice was level, completely controlled. Controlled the way a river is controlled by banks that have been built high and strong over a very long time. "He did," Briggs said, "every day." She was quiet for a moment. "So do I," she said. Briggs nodded. He shifted his weight on the crutches. He looked at the base around them, the lights, the movement, the ordinary machinery of a place that had been through something extraordinary and was still functioning. "There's something you should know," he said. His voice had changed slightly. Back to the operational register, the careful precision of a man delivering information that matters. "Before we left tonight, I made a call to someone I know at a level above this base's operational chain. I told them what was happening. I gave them your name, your real designation." Rachel turned to look at him. He looked back steadily. "I wasn't authorized to do that," he said, "and I'd do it again." She held his gaze. "Who?" she said. "Someone who has been trying to find you for 8 months," he said. "Someone who has been watching Volkov's network from the other direction and has been looking for the operational signature that's been disrupting it. They didn't know who Ghost was. They knew the work. They've been trying to find the source." He paused. "They want to meet you." Something shifted in the air between them. Rachel felt it, not threat, not danger, something else. The specific gravitational pull of a door being opened. "What do they want?" she said. "To offer you a room," he said. "Not a corner station. A room, with a table, where your report gets read before the mission launches." She looked at him for a long moment, long enough that the silence between them filled up with everything the night had cost and everything it had produced, and the particular, specific weight of a moment that is also a turning point. "Tell me more," she said. "Yeah, man." At 0100 hours, the operations building held a gathering that was not on any official schedule and would not appear in any official log. It assembled itself organically, the way things assemble when people have been through something together, and the need to be in the same room about it is stronger than any formal directive. Torres was there with 4 of his men. Chen was there still in his corpsman's gear. Alvarez, the young specialist who had confirmed Rachel's departure from the vehicle bay and had been processing the implications of that ever since. 3 other analysts who had watched Mercer dismiss her report that morning and had said nothing and were now inside the specific discomfort of having been witnesses to their own silence. Harrington came in on his own feet, moving carefully, and the room acknowledged him with the quiet relief of people seeing someone they were afraid they wouldn't see again. He found a chair. He sat. Mercer came in last. He stood near the door. He didn't take a seat. He stood with the bearing of a man who has decided that what he owes this room is his full presence and his complete honesty, and that anything less would be an insult to everyone in it. Rachel was at the front of the room. Not because anyone had put her there, because she had walked to the front and stood there, and the room had organized itself around her the way rooms organize around someone who has earned through specific and costly means the right to occupy that particular position. She looked at the faces in front of her. Every single one of them was watching her with the specific, focused attention of people who are prepared to hear something important. She took a breath. "Tonight happened because of a failure of information," she said. "Not a failure of courage, not a failure of skill, not a failure of anyone's fundamental commitment to this mission or to each other. A failure of information. A report existed that contained what we needed to prevent everything that happened tonight. It was submitted. It was not read. People were hurt because of that gap." She paused. "That is the lesson tonight is trying to teach us. Not that any one person is infallible. Not that rank determines accuracy. The lesson is that information has no rank. A correct observation doesn't become incorrect because of who makes it." The room was completely quiet. "Harrington is alive," she said. "Torres's Bantu men are alive. Briggs is alive and annoyed about his ankle, which is how you know he's really fine." A small, brief release of tension moved through the room. She let it pass. "Those are the facts of tonight that matter most. The rest, the report, the decisions, the failures and corrections, those are the work we do tomorrow and the day after. That's the ongoing work." She looked at Mercer. Direct, clear, without malice. "We do it better by doing it honestly." Mercer held her gaze. He nodded. She looked back at the room. "You don't need to know who I am," she said. "What I am? Those are classified facts that have no bearing on what this base does tomorrow morning. What you need to know is this: there are people in every room, at every base, in every operation who see things that others don't, who ask questions that make the people in authority uncomfortable, who submit reports at 5 in the morning and drink cold tea at their corner stations and wonder if anyone is paying attention." She paused. "Pay attention to those people. They might be logistics analysts. They might be the most dangerous asset you've ever worked with. Either way, what they're telling you is worth hearing. She stopped. The room held the silence for a moment. Then Torres stood up. He didn't say anything. He just stood. Then the man beside him stood. Then Chen. Then Alvarez. Then one by one the rest of the room until everyone was standing, including Mercer, who rose from near the door with the deliberate care of a man ensuring he gets this moment exactly right. The last one to stand was Harrington. He rose from his chair slowly, his hand braced against the armrest, the ribs making their presence known in the tightening around his eyes. He straightened fully. He looked at Rachel across the room. He said nothing. He didn't need to. She looked back at him, at all of them. These men who had, over the course of 15 hours, moved from ignoring her to standing in silent acknowledgement of something she couldn't have named precisely but felt with complete certainty. She nodded once. She walked out. 02:30 hours. The base had gone to its reduced nighttime operational posture. The lights in the operations center were at half the communication station manned by a single overnight operator, the vehicle bay quiet. Rachel was in her quarters. Her bag was on the bed. It was not a large bag. It never was. Everything she owned that she needed fit into a space that most people would consider inadequate because she had learned over a long time to carry only what was essential. Everything else was weight. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with a photograph in her hand. Not looking at it exactly, holding it, the way you hold something that belongs to a category of objects that are more than objects. It was a photograph of two people, a man and a woman, young, standing in front of something that couldn't quite be identified in the frame. The man had her eyes, the same dark, complete camera shutter eyes. He was laughing at something outside the frame, and the laugh had reached every part of his face in the specific total way that some people's laughs do, the kind that makes you want to be present for whatever produced it. She had been carrying this photograph for 9 years. She had carried it through 14 countries and 31 operations in more corner stations than she could count. She had carried it through the operations that worked perfectly and the ones that went sideways, and the long specific grief of losing someone in a way that never gets entirely resolved, only integrated, carried forward, made into something functional rather than something that stops you. She was looking at it tonight because tonight had cost her something and given her something in equal measure, and she needed to account for both. Her brother had gone into Fallujah alone because his people were inside and he couldn't leave them. She had gone into a desert compound alone for the same reason. Not the same person, not the same mission. The same fundamental thing, the decision that lives beneath all the training and the tactics and the classified designations, the decision about what you will do when there is no authority telling you what to do and no one watching to record whether you do it right. She knew what she would do. She had always known. She put the photograph in the bag. A knock at the door. She recognized the weight of it. "Briggs, come in," she said. He came in on the crutches, managed the door with the controlled irritation of a man who has decided to master this situation regardless of how long it takes, and came to stand in the middle of the small room. "Flight out at 0600, he said. "Mercer arranged it. Your debrief will be stateside." He paused. He also submitted a commendation, full operational detail, to the level of command above his. She looked up at it. "He didn't have to do that," she said. "No," Briggs said. "He didn't." He let that sit for a moment. "He also asked me to tell you something." He said, and I'm quoting because he was very specific about the wording. He said, "I read the report. All of it, every word, and I understand what I missed." Rachel was quiet. "He means it," Briggs said. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm glad he said it." Briggs stood in the room for a moment, leaning on the crutches, looking at her with the steady, specific attention of a man who has one more thing to say and is choosing the moment for it with the same care he brought to everything. "The people I told you about," he said, "the ones who want to meet you, they're not going to make you stop being invisible if you don't want to be. That's not what they're offering." He paused. "They're offering you a table where invisible and visible can be the same thing, where your work doesn't have to live in a corner and your reports don't have to sit in an unread inbox." He looked at her steadily. "Where what you are doesn't have to be a secret from the people you're protecting." She looked at him. She looked at her bag on the bed. She looked at the door. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I'm asking," he said. He turned toward the door, managed it with somewhat less irritation than the first time, paused before going through it. "Rachel," he said. "Yes." Get some sleep. 3 hours is better than zero. She almost smiled. Good night, Sergeant Major. He left. She sat for another moment in the quiet room. She thought about Torres's daughter. She thought about Chen's sister and her idea about rooms and decisions. She thought about Harrington standing up from his chair, despite the ribs, because some moments require you to stand, regardless of what it costs. She thought about Alvarez, 22 years old, who had watched and said nothing, and she was fairly certain the kind of person who would not make that mistake again. She thought about her brother, about the laugh in the photograph, about the 9 years of carrying him forward into every room she walked into, every corner station she occupied, every report she submitted, and at 5 in the morning into an inbox that might or might not be opened. He had believed the work mattered even when no one was watching. She believed it too. She lay down on the bed. She did not close her eyes immediately. She looked at the ceiling of a room at a base in a desert, and she listened to the bass settle around her, and she let herself feel just briefly and completely the full weight of the last 15 hours. 2 men alive who might not have been. 12 men who could go home to the people waiting for them. A commander returned from a desert that had tried to swallow him whole. A network of 8 months' work dismantled. A man named Volkov who would not be building anything new. Not everything. Not the inside access question not fully resolved. Not the larger architecture of who had been watching the base's movement patterns for 6 weeks. Not the cost to Briggs's ankle or her shoulder, or the 2 men still in the medical bay. Not the particular specific grief of still carrying the photograph. But enough. Tonight it was enough. She closed her eyes. At 0600, Rachel Dawson, who was not logistics, who had never been logistics, who was Ghost and had always been Ghost, walked out of Fob Sentinel with a bag that weighed less than 40 pounds and contained everything she needed. The tarmac was quiet in the early morning. The helicopter was staged and waiting. The pilot ran through pre-flight checks with the focused economy of someone who does this before dawn on a regular basis and has made his peace with early mornings. Harrington was there. She hadn't expected him to be. He was standing at the edge of the tarmac in clean clothes with his arm against his side for the ribs and the same steady, unbroken face he'd had in the compound when she told him to leave, and he refused. He held out his hand. She took it. They shook once firm, the handshake of 2 people who have been through something together and are not going to diminish it by pretending it was less than what it was. Wherever they send you next, he said, someone is going to be glad you're there. They just won't know it yet. She looked at him. They never do, she said. She walked to the helicopter. Behind her, standing in a loose group at the edge of the tarmac, Torres Chen Alvarez Briggs on his crutches and 5 others she had learned by face, if not always by name. Over the last 15 hours, a line of people who would remember this night for the rest of their lives, who would tell the story different depending on who was asking and what they were cleared to know, but who would all carry the same central indelible fact of it. She had been there. She had seen what everyone else had missed. She had gone where no one had told her to go and done what no one had thought to ask her to do, and she had brought a man home from a desert that had been designed to keep him. The helicopter lifted. Rachel Dawson did not look back. She didn't need to. The desert fell away below her, vast and indifferent, and already filling in the marks that people had made on it, the way deserts do, with the patient certainty of something that has been here longer than any of them and will be here long after. She looked forward, toward wherever they would send her next, toward the next corner station, the next cold cup of tea, the next room full of people who would look past her and file her in the wrong category and fail to read the report she had submitted at 5 in the morning. She would be ready when they finally looked. She was always ready. And somewhere in the classified architecture of the organizations that move like ghosts through the spaces between what is known and what is acted upon, a file was being updated. A designation confirmed, a name attached to a body of work that had over 18 months and 14 countries and 31 operations been consistently, completely, and absolutely correct. The name was Ghost. And Ghost was not invisible because she was overlooked. She was invisible because she chose to be. And when she chose to be seen, the desert remembered.